Which space game are you playing? Well, it turns out that 45% of my audience are not playing space games at all. Could it be then that 12 players are waiting for a replacement space game that also happens to be a single-player RPG? If so, then Bethesda's upcoming Starfield could well fill the void. Now, very recently, Todd Howard took to answering a few questions about the game, and yes, I am a bit late on getting to this information, but I want to give a few of my thoughts and impressions about the new details. So if you'd like to hear those, then do stick around. Now, a big divisive factor over all the existing space games out there has been whether they are soft sci-fi or hard sci-fi. And the reason the subject is divisive is because some people tend to throw insults around along with it. For example, Elite Dangerous is boring because it's hard sci-fi, or No Man's Sky is childish because it's soft sci-fi. For the sake of this video though, let's chuck all that nonsense aside. Bethesda pretty much point out that they consider Starfield to be on the hard side of science fiction. That is, they aim more for science rather than fantasy. But they do feel there are some limits here. For example, sooner or later, science and realism is going to come at odds with fun and gameplay. And here, in my opinion at least, gameplay should win out every time. Unless of course you're making a hardcore flight simulator such as X-Plane 12 or Microsoft Flight Simulator. And regardless of what some people may believe, none of the big three space games fit into the full-on simulation category. So yeah, when it comes to gaming, I really do feel that realism needs to take a bit of a backbench if it's going to get in the way of gameplay. For Starfield then, there's a very specific example for this, and it comes down to flight. Specifically, the use of gravity wells and fuel. It seems that the original approach was to use consumable fuel, but what happens is that players sooner or later run out of fuel and then have to get involved in micromanagement. Bethesda felt that this is something that gets in the way of fun gameplay, and it's something I do agree with them on. So instead, what happens is that fuel does have an impact on your ship's capabilities, but it's actually a determiner on the distance you can actually travel. You're not going to run out of fuel en route, but you simply won't be able to undertake the journey if you don't have enough fuel. It's a reasonable compromise between realism and gameplay, and hopefully it will work out pretty well. Another area of realism comes down to visuals, visual appeal. Its visual style is very much heavy on these sci-fi elements, hard sci-fi there, more towards the Expanse era then, rather than the Star Trek era. Now, some other interesting details we got here is to do with traits. Traits, of course, are perks basically that players can take on, giving them a particular stat boosts or other benefits. Let's have a look at a selection of them. Dream Home. You own a luxurious, customizable house on a peaceful planet. Unfortunately, it comes with a 50,000 credit mortgage with Galbank that has to be paid weekly. Empath. You are deeply connected to the feelings of others. Performing actions your companion likes will result in a temporary increase in combat effectiveness, but performing actions they don't like will have the precise opposite effect. Extrovert. You are a people person. Exerting yourself uses less oxygen when adventuring with human companions, but more when adventuring alone. Can't be combined with introvert. So you get the point. We'll play the others on the screen right here. You can have a bit of a look. But essentially, yes, you get a nice benefit here, but also a downside to each of these. Traits, as with most of these types of games, once you choose them, you tend to be stuck with them. Things are a little bit different with Starfield though, because you can remove traits. Not just the negative benefits, you can't move those alone, but you can remove the entire trait if you no longer want it. To do this, you participate in specific quests or specific tasks. It seems like each specific trait has its own unique quest. Naturally then, this will be quite beneficial if your particular playstyle is not really suited after some experimentation to some of the traits that you have chosen. Whether or not you can then choose further traits replacing them is something that hasn't yet been answered. But hopefully it is an option, as being traitless would be a bit of a letdown and probably not entirely beneficial. Moving on, there's been a lot of speculation as to how dialogue would work in Starfield. One particular question here is to do with persuasion. This is now going to be completely integrated into the dialogue tree. Now, Bethesda have said that each option here costs a certain number of points, and I assume that this is represented by the numbers next to each option. You can see down the bottom there's some greyed out dashes for persuasion. There's 4 empty slots there, and that now gets filled up by 3 due to choosing the dialogue with +3. So yes, it would be possible to go to +4 here, but not +5 it would seem. It also seems there's a number of turns that can be taken when it comes to persuasion. Now, dialogue is very important when it comes to single-player RPGs. Imagine Mass Effect or Skyrim, Switcher, or any of those games without good quality dialogue. The thing is that Bethesda dialogue at times can be a bit ropey, and they're not the best storytellers out there. Perhaps with that in mind then, they seem to be sticking to tried and trusted methods, going back to a slightly previous era of Bethesda games, but using some additional refinement and trying to make improvements where and as they can. Talking of dialogue, Starfield is going to have 250,000 lines of dialogue. That's beating both Fallout 4 and Skyrim combined by quite a big margin. Finally, a huge bit of community speculation here. The release date for Starfield was recently changed and updated over on the Steam database, and we can see this on the Steam DB website. It says the 29th of December 2023. It also says that may be wrong, and to be perfectly honest, I think anyone with any sense would suggest that this is indeed wrong. It's extremely unlikely that any games company is going to release a brand new game, let alone one as big as Starfield, after the Christmas period. Far more likely then that it's going to be released earlier in the year, hopefully as been hinted in the past, the first half of 2023. If it does slip though, I'd imagine it would be no later than November 2023, but you know, let's hope that it's still a few months away rather than over a year away. At any rate, that brings us to the end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.